Welcome to the Private Practice Startup Podcast, where we help mental health professionals grow their dream practices and live a life they love. We chat with successful private practitioners, business coaches, and marketing experts, bringing you tons of practice building tips. We invite you to take advantage of our private practice paperwork and our signature marketing e-course. And we have a gift for you. This is the exact methodology we use to create our six-figure private pay practices and have helped many other therapists do the same. Go to privatepracticestartup.com and on the homepage, click the button to download a free copy of your dream private practice playbook. Now on to today's episode.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Private Practice Startup Podcast. We are excited that you all are here. And Kate and I have been on a little hiatus. That's because our amazing executive assistant was on maternity leave. So we batched a bunch of podcasts. It's always good to be back in the podcast seat, but it's like, oh, wait, I forgot this. I forgot that. So, but we're excited about today's guest. We're excited to be back recording. And we're excited to bring you awesome and new content because this is an area in our 300 plus episodes we have not talked about before. So today we're going to be talking about how securing contracts, so government, school, et cetera, can boost your private practice income. And our guest today is Ajita Robinson, Dr. Ajita Robinson. We are excited to welcome her as our first time guest and also first time topic. So let me tell you a little bit about Ajita. Ajita is a first generation poverty and trauma survivor. I know that we're on a podcast, but she has Trauma Disruptor t-shirt on, which is so cool as we're talking.
I love it.
Yeah, you'll have to check out the social media so you can see a picture of her t-shirt and us. Anyway, she's a trauma survivor. She became who she needed, whether she's seeing clients or helping therapists walk fully into their purpose. She's a servant leader. She leveraged her background as a corporate revenue strategist to help mental professionals build purposeful and profitable living legacies. And by the way, if you ever meet her in person, French fries is her love language. Welcome, Ajita.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you. I'm just excited to be here with you all.
We are excited to have you, and you've been traveling the world in different places, and I know you're on your home turf right now, but you're traveling again. So we'll talk a little bit about that. But before we dive into kind of getting to know you and your topic, let's just take a quick moment for our sponsor.
Directories can be a good source for new clients, but which directories are really worth it? Well, according to an extensive review of therapist directories by Very Well Mind, more than 90% of therapists recommend Mental Health Match. We love Mental Health Match because they understand that the therapeutic relationship starts even before the client contacts you. They've set up their directory to give clients a sense of confidence in you as a clinician and connection with you as a person. Their smart matching technology makes sure you only hear from clients who are a good fit for your practice. And referrals come with insightful information about the client, their presenting problems, and what they seek in a therapist. With over 10,000 clients coming every week, Mental Health Match is a great way to find the clients you want. Erin Moore, a New Jersey therapist, said, "I've been getting almost 2 referrals a week from Mental Health Match, and I like their ability to match me with my niche clients. These clients reflect my skill sets, and they come ready and open to the therapeutic process. This is energizing for both the therapist and clients. We could not agree more. And now you can try Mental Health Match for free for 90 days. Just go to mentalhealthmatch.com and use referral code STARTUP. That's mentalhealthmatch.com and referral code STARTUP.
So Ajita, let's just kind of start with current, where have you been going and what have you been doing?
I actually just came back from a trip I went to Bali, and I also went to the Philippines. And so part of going to Bali is, I host these international retreats, and I went to scout venues, right? And so that was fun. And then I popped over to the Philippines to meet part of my team and to conduct an in-person hiring event. So amazing things, right? All of which were like brand new things for me to do. I've never even been to that side of the world, and it was quite the adventure, and such a long flight, right? So, but worth it 100 times over.
How amazing to go to the other side of the world to have those experiences. Wow, that's so cool.
And how long were you gone for, and where are you going next?
For 10 days. I was gone for 10 days. And then it took me 3 or 4 days to recover on the way back. So I'll plan differently next time. And then I head to Jamaica in 4 days, I think, 4 days. So I'm excited about that. Yeah, I love that I get to travel, and this time I get to bring my kids along on the journey. And so that adds, just adds additional magic to that. So we're going to Negril for the first time. So I'm
Awesome.
super excited about those adventures.
And how old are your
Amazing.
kiddos?
They are the ones that are home, are 16. I have a 16-year-old daughter. It's going into her junior year. And I will have an 8-year-old as of Friday. And so,
Aw. Well, happy birthday to your 8-year-old. Awesome.
Thank you.
So tell us a little bit about where your journey started. I know that you said in corporate revenue, you were a corporate revenue strategist. So did you do that before you came into mental health? Did you do mental health first? So tell us about your journey.
Yes. And so I have both a bachelor's in psychology and in business, and both masters in business and psychology. Right. And so I knew that I wanted to do, some work I thought I was going to be a forensic psychologist, actually. And then as a result of internship, I was like, I think that part is going to pan out. But while I'm figuring that out, I'm leveraging my business degree because, as you all know, a bachelor's in psychology is not sustainable or viable, right? For life. And I had already had the experience of what it meant, to be impoverished. And I knew that that wasn't something that I wanted to continue. So I needed a different strategy, right, to sustain life. And so I leveraged my business degree. I was working, I actually started off at Pfizer in pharmaceuticals, and became a trainer and did it, institutional hospital rep really quickly. So before the age of 23, right? And then Nestle recruited me from Pfizer. And so I actually stayed at Nestle, until I went to law school, also while at Nestle, finished my master's in counseling while at Nestle. They paid for most of it as well. And I'm kind of doing the mental health thing part-time because, again, I can't afford to take a hit in, income, right? And now I have a 2.5-year-old, so I really can't afford to lose income. But I'm still feeling called to do more, right? Like, yes, I loved what I was doing at Nestle, but I was really helping Nestle get more dog food on Walmart shelves, right? Walmart was my main customer and client. And my job was really to broker partnerships between these large conglomerates, essentially, right? And so making billion-dollar company, millions of more dollars, wasn't really doing life-saving work. And so I was still feeling pulled, right? Both of my parents have backgrounds in mental health and have my entire life. And so when I decided to initially finish law school and go full-time, I knew I was going to have to give up that corporate career. And it was while I was in law school that I was struggling. Academically, I was doing well, had a 4.0. But I was struggling because the law was not taking into consideration how people were entering, especially people who look like me, were entering the criminal justice system. And I kept seeing unresolved trauma and substance use. And as someone who has a parent that was incarcerated until I was 8, that was personal for me. And I couldn't reconcile what I was being asked to ignore. And a very amazing woman that was my contracts professor at the time said, I think you should take your elective over in the clinical program. And that's where I took my first course in grief, and then I never left. And so that's my full circle moment of coming into, and just stop running really from being a therapist, because I didn't really know how I was going to blend those two backgrounds. And now I actually leverage both of them, right? So the revenue and income strategy that I learned to do in corporate America, I now get to teach mental health professionals to do that in ways that actually improve the lives of the folks that they feel called to serve, and not just selling like dog food and, Viagra, right? Which is what I was doing, almost 20 years ago, right? Both great products, not life-changing in the ways that I felt called to do. And so that's kind of how I've blended those two different worlds and careers, right?
I love hearing about your story and just how all the different experiences that you have had have led you to where you are today, and you're able to make an impact in such a meaningful way. And I just can't wait to hear more. So where do we go from here?
Well, Well, let's dive into the topic. How did you, get into this aspect of private practice and helping clinicians build their practice through securing contracts?
Yeah, so I think it came back to being approached and being present in my local community and being asked to work with primarily youth, again, who were young, were in areas where there was significant poverty and high exposure to trauma. And so individuals that had a high need, but low resources to pay for services. And so part of what got me into contracting was like, someone has to be willing to pay for these services, right? And so really having to go back to my corporate kind of training where we're trained to think about who's your customer, right? Who's the person who buys from you or who will pay for the service, and who's the consumer, who's the end user, and recognizing that they weren't the same. And we knew that we need to serve these youth and their families that could never access right services, private pay, and we didn't want to do Medicaid because there's a ton of reasons we didn't want to do Medicaid, right? And so there had to be another way, right? And so we began contracting directly with the schools, and many of those contracts really was the state paying us to deliver services, and we could kind of circumvent insurance, right? And some of the red tape that comes with, navigating with insurance. And so that's really where it started, was wanting and having a deep desire to meet this need and to serve this population who didn't have the capacity to pay, right? And so that's kind of how it started for our practice. I always say my clinical director's been with me since month 7 of me opening the practice. And thankfully he's still, on board. And so I always talk about it as, us and our, right? I certainly haven't done this alone. And so that's what initially, started that contracting process. And then we expanded to working with, so from school districts to counties to the federal government, is how we've continued to expand those relationships and build those contracts out.
What tips do you have for clinicians who are interested to get their foot in the door with the school systems in particular to how to begin to create these types of relationships and contract opportunities?
Great question. And so I always remind clinicians that one thing that's going to be really critical is that they have their house in order. And I mean that when you contract with a school system or anytime you're receiving public funds, right? So taxpayer dollars fund a lot of the initiatives that are happening, or grants, right, and contracts from school systems or, federal governments, right? There's some accountability there. And so they're going to ask for your profit and loss statements, your balance sheets. And so your accounting has to be in order. They're going to make sure that you're fiscally responsible, right? The other reason that that's important is that oftentimes contracting sounds super sexy, but what people often don't tell you is the payable terms are often 45 and 60 days net, right? So you'll deliver the service, but you may not be paid for 45 to 60 days. If you aren't doing one, can you afford to delay being paid for 45 to 60 days? And then if you have contractors or employees, I don't know anyone that's willing to work for free for 45 to 60 days. And so you should have a plan on paying out for the services before you're reimbursed, right? Another reason to think about cash flow. The other thing that I would say is oftentimes I see mental health professionals are either unaware or not leveraging business certifications. And so I have 4, right? So I'm a woman-owned business, a disadvantaged business owner, a minority-owned business, and then there's one other that I always forget, right? And there's veteran-owned businesses. I don't have that one, right? My husband does. And what that does is it gives you essentially a unique competitive advantage. There's some funding mechanisms that are set aside specifically for small business, for marginalized businesses, that allow you to maybe compete in a space where there's a larger entity that either the state will say, hey, you have to intentionally go and find a smaller business to partner with, or it just gives you an advantage in your scoring, right? That increases the likelihood of you winning a contract that you still have to be eligible, right, and qualified, but it allows you to compete in a marketplace where you may not have as much experience as someone else, right? And so those are some things that I would say, if I were to add one more, is to get clear about who you serve and what problem they have, right? And so we specialize in grief and trauma. We're very clear about what services we're leveraging and we're bringing to the school districts or to the federal government. And we know what our unique positioning is that allows us to compete in a otherwise saturated market. And so getting really good at telling that part of your story and your journey, and to know that your clinical skills are transferable outside of direct practice, I think those are the things that allow us to continue to have profitable partnerships that are meaningful, that are impactful. That was a lot. Clearly, I get excited,
it's
right?
so helpful.
No.
Yeah. It's so helpful. I'm curious on the flip side too, once you have these contracts and you're getting the referrals and you have everything systemized and streamlined, your house is in order, are they asking for any type of satisfaction or outcome type research data? Tell us about that.
Absolutely. And so I am a data guru. So I'm trained as a mixed methodologist. So this piece actually lights me up. But if you aren't, you can hire a company to do this piece. There's a lot of administration, right? You have to account for how you've spent that budget from the indirect and direct costs, so directly paying for if you're providing clinical services, or you absolutely want to capture outcome measurements, right? So we always do pre and post. That should be familiar for us to some degree because we're doing intake assessments. We're, capturing, their BDI or their impact of event scale, right? Those measurements that we utilize clinically, score them, right? And then what's the impact post-intervention or post-workshop or what have you. And so I will tell you that the fact that we come prepared and experienced with data management and reporting on outcomes, we do this in executive briefings and debriefings and summaries, often gives us an advantage because oftentimes school systems are used to having to figure this part out on their own because most practitioners don't have the program evaluation skill set because that's effectively what it is. And we do, right? Some of that comes from my experience as a mixed methodologist that has served as a program evaluator for other people's programs. But if I didn't have that experience, I would partner with someone that does to do that part of the reporting. This is also super effective when you go back to tell them not only the impact of the services, but when you go back and say, hey, this is what we were able to accomplish with this scope of work, but here's the continued unmet need. That's the benefit, right? So we've been able to expand a contract that started off as $100,000 to $6 million, right, over time as a result of being able to talk about the impact of working with us, as well as what the continued need was, not only for student, faculty, but staff as well. And to go from serving one department to the entire university system, right? Because we've done this K through 12 universities and at the federal government level.
Very, very interesting. And, as you're talking, I'm thinking of a different podcast topic of not everything I needed to know I've learned in community mental health, because that sure is not the case. But for those of us who worked in community mental health, hospitals, whatever, we were doing all of this stuff as part of our program. And then, of course, if we were in leadership and management, we had to track the data and the numbers and stay within a budget. And so if you already have that background, if you could kind of like transplant yourself back to those times, like you already have these skills right now as the leader and owner of your, private practice. It's then transferring that skills to a document on paper and then having some type of system and follow up really to track that, because you're absolutely right. I remember all the times, it's like, we only have 3 months left. We have to spend the budget. We have to spend the budget. So then we can show the outcomes so we can get more money to serve, the clients we are serving. So very interesting that you talked about that. But before we continue, Ajita, let's just take a quick moment for our sponsor.
As a private practice owner, there are dozens of things to worry about. If you decide to accept insurance billing does not have to be a worry. Practice Solutions is a remote billing company who connects providers with billers in the U.S. who specialize in mental health billing. Their expertise has helped clinicians increase and maintain steady revenue by submitting and following up on claims regularly, resolving old aging claims, and performing eligibility and benefit checks. With Practice Solutions, you're assigned a billing expert who learns the ins and outs of your practice, functioning as an extension of your own team, so you can focus on what matters most, your clients and growing your practice. One of Practice Solutions' current clients says,
Practice Solutions has been amazing for my practice, its growth, and my peace of mind when it comes to billing. Practice Solutions works with clients ranging from solo practitioners just starting out, as well as to larger group practices with multiple clinicians. Practice Solutions offers a free billing consultation to determine if their services are a good fit for you and your practice. Visit practicesoul.com/startupnation and schedule an appointment. Again, that's a free consultation at practicesoul.com/startupnation. As a therapist, I can tell you from experience that having the right EHR is an absolute lifeline. I recommend using Therapy Notes. They make billing, scheduling, note-taking, telehealth, and e-prescribing incredibly easy. Best of all, they offer live telephone support that's available 7 days a week. Look, don't take my word for it. Do your own research. Therapy Notes is the #1 highest rated EHR available today with 4.9 out of 5 stars on Trustpilot and Google. Go to therapynotes.com and enter code PPS as in Private Practice Startup and receive a special 2-month trial, absolutely free. And hey, if you're coming from another EHR, no worries. Therapy Notes will import your demographic data quick and easy at no cost to you so you can get started right away. Trust me, don't waste any more of your time. Go to therapynotes.com and enter code PPS for your 2-month free trial. It's funny as you talk, like I love data. I know Kate does too. I don't like to track all the data. I like to look at the data.
Yes, exactly.
And make sense of it. Yeah, I don't want to do the tasks of tracking it all, but it's interesting how you kind of bring this into back up into where we are today in private practice and things like that. What are some things you wish you knew before you kind of got started doing contract stuff?
I've learned a lot about crafting effective proposals and really being able to decipher the language in a funding proposal, right, or a request for a bid. I have learned a lot about partnership. There are contracts that we could have gone after, but we disqualified ourselves because independently we didn't meet the criteria to fulfill the agreement. But we learned a lot about what does it look like to go into the marketplace and build partnerships with individuals that have skill sets that you don't have. I think this is one thing that is a blind spot for many of us as practitioners, especially in maybe solo practice, that we're only thinking about our capacity and we don't think about that there are other folks in the marketplace in the field who have a skill set that we can leverage together, right? Independently, neither of us may have the full scope, but together we may be a powerhouse team. And so for me, it's been all about community, and leveraging combined efforts and skill sets, right? So I think that's something that although I understood that from a corporate perspective, mental health is still different, right? And how do you navigate those pieces? I absolutely would have developed a framework sooner had I known the impact of doing so, right? And so we all use frameworks, whether they're theoretical frameworks or mostly theoretical frameworks, right? So, I'm trained in EMDR and brain spotting. I'm a person-centered therapist. All of those have frameworks that kind of ground the approach, right? Our way of understanding, being, and intervening, right? But I didn't think about in the beginning, the framework that I was utilizing to go into a school system or to go into a workplace environment and to really make organizational change, to create a mental health strategy. And what I have identified is that in and of itself is a product that I have been able to license. Department of Defense has been our biggest recurring client, licensing my framework around grief, right? Grief with law enforcement officers, grief with first responders. And had I leveraged that, I was doing it, but I hadn't really put those components together in a way that really made sense, that I could then teach to someone else, right? And so all of it was active income. So I would have done that piece faster, because when I did, it took some of the pressure off of me being the only person that could train or me being the only person with the skill set. And then it didn't require that I travel and speak and train so much because we could make it available and accessible to people that didn't have the budget that the federal government has, right? And so those are things that I just wish I had known. If I can add one more, this is really about mindset, right? And so I had to unlearn the things that I had actually learned in my master's and doctoral program about what it meant to serve as a mental health therapist, because our skill sets are transferable in so many ways that do not involve sitting in a therapy seat, right? And there was an immense amount of guilt, especially being one of few Black women doctors that specialize in grief and trauma, that, takes insurance, things of that nature. And I had a significant amount of guilt when it came to pivoting who I was serving or how I was serving. And that was some unlearning that I needed to do that I think we rub against quite often because of the way that we are onboarded to this field, right? And so I think those are things that are just important to kind of reflect on.
Yeah, and I so appreciate you acknowledging that and calling that out, because I know that there's therapists right now listening to this podcast that are struggling in that space. And I know for me, when I made the leap out of doing private practice full time, is there's some like therapist shame, right? And it's kind of like, but I went to school for all these years, and it's a helpful, career. And so it definitely takes a lot of work. And even throughout our entire growth or our journey, there's things that we have to reflect on. So thank you for sharing that.
I love that you also brought up the mindset component, because I can imagine that it can be quite intimidating to step outside of the norm and kind of disrupt the system a bit with, thinking outside of the box and reaching out to these big organizations and, pitching and bidding and developing these contracts when it might be totally new to clinicians. I mean, entrepreneurship is hard enough for clinicians. And there's a lot of mindset stuff with imposter syndrome and things like that. So I would imagine that the mindset stuff, can really needs to be addressed. What recommendations do you have, Ajita, for clinicians to be able to really tackle that aspect?
I think one of the big ones is to kind of name what some of those things are that are coming up. I like to talk about this as what do you have to evict in order for you to go to the next leg of your journey? And I'm a big proponent of being in community. And so, I like finding folks that are doing the thing that I desire to do. I view those folks as proof of what's possible as opposed to competition, right? There's lots of folks that we can learn from. I've had to find those folks outside of mental health, but in other service-based industries, because there's some transferable things there as well. And so I think sometimes it does require that we really need to build community around the thing that we desire to do. I like to take directions from people that are invested in me arriving at my destination, right? So reaching out and receiving resources and support and mentorship, I know that I don't have to reinvent the wheel. Oftentimes we think we have to figure it out ourselves. We actually need to fire ourselves from as many things as possible so that we actually can do the thing that's our zone of genius, right? And so I think those are some of the things that we have to kind of address. It may be required, but it may not require you. So that might mean partnering with someone that's experienced with writing grants so that you can be the subject matter expert, but that you do not have to have the skill set in grant writing. It will make you want to scoop your eyeballs out if you've ever done grant writing and it's not your jam, right? You don't have to be the accounting or, the CPA to manage the data. There's so many other ways you can partner that you should partner that allows you to leverage your brilliance, in a way that's actually necessary, right? And so those are things that I would recommend.
I love it. I love it all.
And one other question is, how do you find the contracts?
Yeah, so if you're looking at a district level or state level, type in your district and the word procurement. It pops up. Type in your state, the word procurement. I like to type in mental health, Maryland procurement. Procurement just most departments or states have a procurement department. It is essentially their contracting department, right? So they contract for services as well as goods. So if you have physical products, I've had, state organizations buy copies of my book. I've had public libraries buy copies of my book. Fun fact, right? So if you have a physical product, because of the ADA, they have to purchase that book or that product in every variation that it exists in, right? So I have a physical book, an ebook, and an audiobook. Our public libraries have to purchase it in every iteration to make it accessible. But procurement is a term that you want to become familiar with. Again, at the local, state, federal, and district level. that's where you will find these contracts. And so I recommend that you are on the procurement listserv or the vendor list. You register as a vendor at the state, local, and federal level, so that you receive the emails that will come out, the announcements that will come out. And then I recommend that you kind of connect with your Department of Health and Human Services. That's where, or whatever it's called in your state, right? That's where a lot of the RFPs that are related to what we do come from, right? And introduce yourself to the program manager, right? A lot of these contracts over time, we have been approached before they have become public because we are a known vendor. Because we're a trusted vendor, we now have a score with our state and with our county. And those things mean quite a bit. If the contract is under a certain threshold, they don't have to make it available for public bidding, right? So you might be approached to provide a service without ever having to compete for it. And so those are the benefits, I think, of one, being visible and building relationships with those that issue contracts, right?
Mm-hmm. Awesome.
You talk a lot about because you have a team. Tell us a little bit about do you have a group practice with clinicians on the team? I'm just curious about your setup.
I do. Every time I'm asked this question, I'm like, I don't even know if I have the numbers right anymore. And so I do have a group practice. We launched into a group practice 7 months after I opened the organization. I think I did maybe too well at marketing, right? Because we were full and I was like, I need more people. And so we've been a group practice since for the past 10 years. My group practice is split between two divisions. And so our primary division serves the general public. And then our second division that we launched 7 years ago is integrated behavioral health. It's actually our largest team. So I think right now we have 151 team members, which is I never imagined that it would get to
Amazing.
That place. COVID really blew our business up in a lot of ways, but that integrated behavioral health team is actually where most of our contracts are. We're co-located in pediatricians' offices, primary care, OBGYN, chiro, speech pathology. And I think we just picked up ortho. And so that's where we've been really growing and making and normalizing mental health and interdisciplinary, patient care. That's how I was trained in my fellowship program that I did in rotating an interdisciplinary team. And I think that that's important as we further integrate mental health into healthcare, because that's where we belong, right? And so that's kind of what we've done that has really exploded things in ways that I could not have prepared for, that have broken our systems that we've had to rebuild, because that's what happens when you grow massively, right? And so that's where the group practice is. Yeah.
That's amazing.
When you share that, Ajita, like applause, chills, because it's like, I feel like so grateful, like that you guys are in, coupled with medical providers and things like that. Like I still don't see that down here. Like you maybe get a referral, but so it's like, okay, the medical aspect, the mental health aspect is coming together. There's providers right on site. I still don't see that a lot down here. I don't know if you do, Kate, but I just don't. So you guys are doing something great. So awesome.
Well, one of few, and they all started as a result of us reaching out, right, to coordinating providers, a client providing a ROI, and then us being one of very few providers that would reach out really every 90 days and do a coordination of care, ask for a consult to say, hey, this is what we're seeing. Is there any interaction or relationship between what you're treating the client for, or around, and how can we kind of be intentional about this treatment plan? So we were mobilizing them, and the benefit to them is that those prescribers can bill for that consultation with us, although we cannot, right? And so it was really a win-win for everyone involved, improve patient care. And then we began to train in their locations and then pitch them to co-locate. And so most of the office we're in, they actually don't charge us overhead to be there because of the immense amount of value we bring, and the way we elevate patient care. If anyone's running on time, it's us, right? So those are things that we've been able, again, our unique selling position. What's the benefit to them of having us there, and why should they waive the overhead cost of giving up space for my team to be there because of the way that we serve? And so I think that's, again, just another partnership, and ways that we can further integrate spaces. So, and I ran out of physical office space for my team. Let's be real about that also, right? So,
amazing.
Yeah. I've just loved everything about this episode and hearing your story and all of these out of the box, amazing ways that you work. And I love this disruptor message you're sending in so many different ways and so many different facets of just disrupting the system in the most beautiful ways to be able to really make this great impact. And I know that our audience with Startup Nation is really enjoying your episode today. And I feel like we could have you back for like a part 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, because you just have such a wealth of information, and I'm really inspired by you. So thank you for being here.
Thank
well
you.
said, Kate. Likewise.
That.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I mean, like Kate said, we could go on and on, but you've hit on so much stuff. I know we're just focusing on contracts today, but one of the things that really stuck out is the word procurement, right? That's not in the world of contracts. I would never think of that word, but I feel like Ajita gave you a golden nugget there if you're really looking to get started on this. But we hope that you guys join us next time as we talk to Dr. Amarla Thomas about 5 strategies to turn your passion into profit. And if you didn't listen to last week's episode, definitely go back and check out Maureen Warbach talking about leadership and accountability. So great stuff on our podcast. We thank you so much, Ajita. What do you want our listeners to take away from your message today?
We're outnumbered. And so we have to identify ways to take that brilliance, that magic that you all do one-on-one and bring it to many. There are folks who aren't coming to therapy. There are more people who need therapy than we can serve. And so I just want every therapist to recognize that we need you to show up and serve in ways that's sustainable, that honors you. We're exiting the field at alarming rates. And so we have to figure out how to close this gap while also building stability for therapists, right? So how do we retain them in the field and not lose that loss of knowledge, and give them time back and a life that they deserve? And so I just want them to know that they can be both purposeful and profitable always, that you do not have to choose. In fact, we need you to do both, right? Because you do more good when you aren't stressed out, overextended, and that all of your skill sets from previous careers, life experience, none of that is wasted.
Beautiful.
Awesome. And I know that you have a giveaway for our audience as well. What is that?
It is. And so I have a free workbook. It's 30 ways to diversify your income. It also not only will introduce them to 30 different ways, although there's 100+ ways, 30 ways that I think are most accessible for therapists. It'll also help disrupt some of the myths and the barriers and give them some prompts to help them kind of begin brainstorming where to get started that leverages how they already serve and who they already serve, right? And so that is the giveaway that we're providing.
Awesome. And we have the link for that on our show notes, so you can grab that there. I definitely will be grabbing that. And Ajita, it was just so great to have you on. Have an amazing trip with your kiddos in Jamaica. Have fun. And we look forward to definitely having you back on the podcast in the future for sure. Kate?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yes. Thank you for being here. Startup Nation, we hope you enjoyed this podcast as much as we did, or even more. Thank you again, Ajita, for being here. And Startup Nation, we want to encourage you to subscribe, rate, and review our show. You can find the links to do so on our show notes page. And make sure you tune in for next week's episode. All right, everybody. In the meantime, stay inspired.
Take care.
Thanks for joining us on The Private Practice Startup. Visit theprivatepracticestartup.com for awesome resources, free trainings, attorney-approved private practice paperwork, and so much more.